Well, no one told me about him, the way he lied. Well, no one told me about him, how people cry. Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? There's no bother trying to find him. He's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way he looks, the way he acts, and the color of his hair. His voice is soft and good, his eyes are clear and bright, but he's not there.
Welcome again. This is Dave Tubman, the author of Movie HOFFA is Missing the Gap, a book that first came out in 2020, and I just republished it again in 2022 on July 30th. But there's a link where you can get the free book online. It's the 2020 edition, basically the same information. But I wanted to invite you to subscribe, like, follow, and share with as many people as you can. This is the only place you'll get most of this information, which has to do with two actual eyewitnesses to what happened when the Maroon Mercury left the Marcus Red Fox on July 30th, 1975. These are actual eyewitnesses. They aren't given credit for that because they didn't report it at first until 2006. So I have a special blog today, and the next one I'm going to split it into two parts, and this is chapter 6, and it's called The Movie HOFFA, where in 2009 the HOFFA Family-Eyewitness and home video was recorded, and contacted Barbara Ann Crancer, and she had never heard any of the story from the FBI, and so I thought I'd better document this. My mom's 92 and never got her recorded as giving this firsthand. And I knew someday I would have to say, did she really tell this story, or is this all hearsay from me? So I am glad that it dawned on me I needed to record her telling the story. I'm going to go ahead through the first part of here, which just give you a little more background about Frances Tubman. I've already kind of talked about her 90th birthday, and then I brought her out in 2007 to live with us in California. She just could not live on her own anymore at her apartment in Detroit, in Westland. So this picks up on page 94 of the book, the 2020 edition, where after the 90th birthday visit, my brother and I flew there and came back. I just started to worry because there was food in the refrigerator that was going bad. It was outdated. She couldn't see or hear. I was concerned for her safety. It was getting pretty rough in that part of Detroit. Graffiti on the walls, and she kept her door locked. She was driving. There was family nearby, but they couldn't, every time she wanted a ride, hop to it. So I went to see her and to just kind of check out her apartment again and her health and just her well-being. And that was in 2007. She did fairly well, actually, with all the things she had going on in her life. She had a cancerous kidney removed, had a toe amputated, had been in and out of the hospital a few times, a stroke she recovered from. But her bills were piling up. She would use her credit cards to buy birthday gifts and things like that. And but she did not open the envelopes. I saw a stack of bills, and I opened each one, and I was so surprised she was not late on any of them. She had made all the minimum payments, but they were still there. And I told her I would check her budget, and she was always looking for her keys, always antsy. Couldn't find her keys, couldn't find her glasses, couldn't find different things. And so I just kind of observed her for a little bit. But once I realized just how difficult life was for her, I was on the floor in the kitchen bawling, talking to my wife Judy, and asking her what I should do. I did some minor repairs around the apartment and got her a jitterbug phone. Then we went to Kroger's, and that's when I realized she was driving really good. I'm in the passenger seat. We go off to Kroger's, which wasn't that far away. She wanted to cook me a special dinner. And I'm watching. She drives fairly carefully in the slow lane. We drive about a mile, and then she turns into the driveway, and she parks well away from other cars. We go in, get some groceries. I let her drive back. Same thing. We get back, and she parks in the carport. And I'm not figuring any concern here. She did pretty well. Then I told her when we got in the apartment, I said, Mom, that was amazing. I didn't know you could still see so well. She says, oh, I just count the treetops. And on the sixth treetop, I turn left. I go to the end of the island and turn left into the parking lot. And I park away from the cars so I don't bump into anybody. And on the way back, I count the trees again and park next to the wall in my spot in the carport. So that night is when I called Judy and described the situation. Up till now, we had thrown the idea around that my mom could come and live with us. She had 5 grandchildren. Of course, my sister Helen lived there and had some friends in the apartment. But to try and pull her away from Michigan was really tough. But I told her, well, Napa's the last resort. You can come live with us, and I'll help manage your health, and things are looking pretty difficult here for you. It was a hard sell. The only way that I could convince her to come was if I waited until after Thanksgiving so she could spend time with the Kirsten side of the family, and which I did, and that she could come and visit. And if she didn't want to stay, I'd bring her back, keep your apartment open, which she did. So we did exactly that. I said I would go back. This was in October of 2007. Said I would go back and make the arrangements, and of course waited till after Thanksgiving. A couple of days after Thanksgiving, I showed up to help her pack some and ship some things that she would need. We left quite a few things in her apartment, not knowing really if she was going to stay or just visit. To be safe, I went ahead and got the legal paperwork done so that I could speak for her to doctors and things like that. And I knew that the Kirsten side of the family weren't going to be happy because they loved her and did not really want to see her leave. But anyway, we go to Metro Airport, and I have the plane tickets. I had shipped some things already ahead of us. So it was pretty crowded at the gate. Mom had to use the restroom, and I'm sitting there. We couldn't give up our seats because we were lucky to get any. She did have her walker there. And it was so crowded, she had to go to the restroom. I couldn't carry all the bags and follow her and then lose our seats. We're right by the gate. So I let her go by herself to the ladies' room while I watched our baggage. The ladies' room was in sight. I could stand and watch her go all the way over there. It was probably about, 20 yards. So I said, okay, Mom, I'll watch and make sure you're okay. And she had a cane that she could use. She didn't have to use the walker. And so she had her glasses. She had kind of an overcoat. It was November, so it was chilly. And I watched curiously as she wandered over towards the bathrooms. Of course, she walked slowly with a cane. And then she kind of drifted a little bit to the right. She wasn't quite, I knew she couldn't see the restrooms. I just told her to go straight that way. And so she kind of drifted over to the right and kind of disappeared by this bank of some payphones that were on a column. And I kind of lost track of her. And then she reappeared. And I kind of sighed a sigh of relief. And she was right in front of the entrance to the men's room. And of course, I couldn't say anything. I was relying on people. I saw a man kind of pointing over towards the ladies' room. So then I see her kind of slowly walking towards the ladies' room, and I go, "Oh, all right, somebody's helping out." And I'm thinking all the way, good job, Mom. She found her way while she did it. And then I see her kind of pause by the ladies' room. She didn't go right in. Seems like she's just standing there. And I thought, go on in, go on in. And then she did go in. And I'm thinking, I got to just keep my eyes glued to this ladies' room. If she wanders the wrong way, I've got to leave everything where they're at and go try and find her or grab her. So she emerges out of the ladies' room and heads again towards me, but I know she couldn't see me, but she headed in the right direction. And then she starts, and again, she disappears behind these bank of phones that are on a column between us. And I couldn't see her. Then she reappeared from behind the phones and pretty close to me. She comes over, and I was glad to see that was over. Then I noticed she was laughing. I said, "What's so funny?" She sat down. I said, "How did it go?" So then she started to tell me. She admitted she couldn't see that well, and she actually headed to the wrong bathroom. And she ended up in front of the men's room. But this nice man pointed me over towards the ladies' room where I was, going in the right direction. So I got over there, and I was about to go in, but I struck up a conversation with this other lady and talked to her for a minute or two. Then I started to notice the other lady had a cane too, just like mine. And then she said she looked a bit closer and realized it was her own reflection she'd been talking to in the full-length wall mirror. So she turned and went into the ladies' room and then came back and she thought that was pretty funny. So we both had a pretty good laugh over that. I told her I was going to get her a full-length mirror for her bedroom when we got back to Napa so she could have someone to talk to whenever she wanted. Which she did. Both closet doors were full-length mirrors. She had her own room. It was really nice. And I painted it baby blue for her. Regarding her health, though, her doctors in Detroit have 2 pages of medications. And so for the next several months after moving to Napa, I had to learn all about Medicare, what these medications were, find her doctors. My wife is a nurse, and so we became her kind of accountability partners. She knocked off getting these little miniature candy bars at the store every time we went, but I didn't know her vitals all the time, and kind of whittled it down to where she was only on 2 medications, and they had changed her blood thinner to one that didn't make her arms bruise so much. So life was pretty, much improved over what she was doing back in her apartment. She lived with us 3.5 years before she passed on January 3rd in 2011. But she had lost up to 25 pounds, primarily because we lived next to a big park, and she was able to take her walker. She walked our dog, would put his leash on the wheelchair and walk him over the park. It was a little Cocker Spaniel. But we had to end that. One day the dog was tied to the chair, and she had to get up to get something out of the walker, and it took up after a cat and took her walker with her, so we had to cut that out. Have fun over there. She'd put an apple or something in her walker, and it was the kind you could sit in. And then people would come by, and she'd chat with them and enjoy watching the kids play on the playground. This is right behind our house. So it was like our backyard. And I didn't feel too concerned. It was a really safe area. And I gave her a chance to push her walker and actually get some walking in. So she got down to just this one blood thinner. And she was on Actos, which was for diabetes. But the doctor said she doesn't need Actos. Her blood sugar's fine. So she was only down to, I think it was Lasix and another blood thinner is what she was on. But one night, my mom and I were relaxing. I was running a sign business, so I worked out of the house, but I would go out in my bucket truck and install signs. And I have a picture, actually, I don't know if I can find it to post, of my mom sitting in my bucket truck. You can see, my sign logo on the door, and she had fun riding with me one time. We'd go up valley and look at the scenery and stuff. So it was kind of a nice place for her. But we sat down to watch the movie Hoffa one night, and this was with Jack Nicholson. Neither of us had seen it, and it was almost like a documentary to us. We just watched it, learned all about how he had developed the unions, and I didn't realize how much vulgar language was in it until I watched it again here recently, and my wife and I, we just turned it off. It was so bad, but it was a good depiction of Hoffa's life, why it was so violent, and really he was kind of like a frog in boiling water. He kind of got used to the violence. It was a necessary evil, and of course the mob was on both sides back then. There were thugs that would beat up the strikers, and then he would hire more thugs to beat up the thugs that beat up the strikers. So we kind of learned something. But when it got to the end, and this young punk snuffed Hoffa in the back seat of a little car at a diner, we just kind of thought, you know, what is this about? So that generated my curiosity. So this is May of 2009 that we watched this movie, and I'm kind of going online. I hadn't done a lot of research. We thought this was over and done, and even the Hoffas would know about it now. But I started this. It's called newspapers.com. It's a really good site. It's free at first. After a while, if you get past the trial, it costs something. But you can go on there if you're curious about a person and you know what state or whatever. You can look up news articles, and that was really helpful. Back then, I think the news reporters were more transparent. You could rely on a lot of the information that they put out. So I began to collect information on Hoffa, the Hoffa case. I found out he had 2 adult children, Barbara Ann and James Jr. And since I had 4 children of my own, I could relate to the sadness that especially the daughter would have. This is just approaching Father's Day, a few weeks later. And so I learned about all the violence surrounding Hoffa's life, but I kind of zeroed in on his family life because that affected me the most. To me, a father-daughter, as well as a father-son, but a father-daughter, I think the daughter really puts her father on a pedestal and admires him, and if there isn't a healthy relationship there, it can affect the rest of the woman's life. So that's what I zeroed in on, his family life. I have 3 girls, and I just had a heart for Barbara Ann Crancer. And not only that, but James Jr. was the current Teamster president, and I wasn't about to call him to tell him the story. Now, during this time, I had also researched and found out there was a gentleman. He was with the mob task force, and he is a federal attorney, I believe, Keith Corbett, and he is pretty pronounced as a expert. He almost single-handedly, from what I read, helped take down the Detroit Mafia over time, and was credited with their ultimate demise, but it's really not done away with. It's the Detroit Partnership now. But he actually lived in the Huntington Woods, the town over from where I grew up in Oak Park, so I was very familiar with the area. I called and talked to him and told him the story, but he said he's retired now, but I said, well, I was going to call Barbara Ann Crancer. Is that a safe bet? And he says, yeah, she's safe to talk to. She's with the Attorney General's office. She's a judge in St. Louis. So I took that as kind of, sanctioning that I could call Barbara Ann Crancer and tell her the story direct. So I just took a shot at this phone number I came up with and ended up talking to Robert Crancer, her husband. And she wasn't home, told him the story and asked permission if I could call back and relate it to Barbara. And he said she'd be very interested. He'll have her call me back when she gets home. And she did. I talked to her twice. And also the thing about the Raleigh house, when I did talk to her, she had never heard a bit about the Raleigh house as far as where her father might have been taken. So this was brand new information for her. Um, but overall, she thanked me for it. She did ask me, "Why didn't your dad come forward?" So I told her the story about the car and the fuse falling out of the gas tank that he had at Darby's. And when the conversation was about to end, she said, "Well, the information isn't actionable." I guess that's what a judge would say. It's circumstantial, and she just felt that she couldn't do anything with it. But she did say, "But your father was right. He did the right thing. The mob was violent at that time, and so he did what was best for the family." Didn't know I needed to hear that from her, but after I got off the phone, I started thinking that was quite powerful coming from the daughter of the man that was murdered. The biggest thing that upset me about the call was that the FBI had told my mom when they handed her the card, "This is for closure for the Hoffa family," and it was all BS. They never intended to pass it along for whatever reason. Now, I didn't know it at the time, and I'm going to cover it later chapters about the Raleigh house. And just so you have a little premonition about it, the FBI actually went to the Raleigh house twice in September, just weeks after the abduction, September 22nd and 29th, because some other story about the Raleigh house had surfaced. And so they just kind of swarmed, interviewed all the employees. They never did interview the truck driver, the garbage truck driver. They discovered that the dumpster could only be accessed from inside. And I am going to order through the Freedom of Information Act, I'm going to order information that it just is not available. It was not too long after the Raleigh house closed. Sam Lieberman was the owner, and he ran the place. He's the one that hired my dad in '74. But in '76, he left the Raleigh house. This is not long after Hoffa's abduction. And it eventually, they were going to reopen it. They closed. They were going to reopen, decided not to. They leveled it and built a high-rise Raleigh Center office building in its place. And that was pretty surprising to me because in 1974, they had tripled the size of the kitchen, and it was all remodeled. And I thought, well, why would they destroy something that they put so much money and effort into? Anyway, so just to give you a little heads up on what's about to come after Chapter 6, and you've seen the videos, then I'm going to really tear apart the alibi that everybody seems to think proves Hoffa was not in the car, and some say O'Brien was just unwittingly involved, and other people say, oh, there's no way he drove the car, it was a look-alike like a Sal Palzolo or whatever. So I'm going to attack all those angles with real evidence, not opinion. Of course, I'll give my opinion, but the evidence, I think, speaks for itself.
Let me tell you about the way you go.